Committee Room 30. Signed. 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 Committee Room 30, 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 signed.
Let me forget about Declaration of interest.
We don't mention GIs and wines and spirits in this session. Is that what you're telling us?
No, we will. We're having evidence on it later.
I know.
Good to go. Okay, so item number 5 on the agenda, draft minutes. Can I just refer everybody to the draft minutes of proceedings at page 205? Members content that the draft minutes of the meeting of 2nd of May 2024 are a true reflection of the proceedings? Content. Matters arising? No matters arising. So move on then to item number 7, which is regulation EU 2024-1157 on shipments of waste. You want to declare?
Yes, sir. I'd like to declare an interest, Chairman, as a member of supporter of No Arc 21, who's against waste incineration and the importing of waste in Northern Ireland.
Okay. Just also to remind members that this item will be recorded by Hansard. If I can refer everyone to your papers, pages 5 to 197 of the meeting pack. In line with agreed committee procedures, an initial assessment of impact was requested on the Replacement EU Act from the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs via the Executive Office. The assessment, which was received late yesterday, can be found in the table pack. Just a reminder, the approach of the committee agreed and communicated to departments is that irrespective of whether a matter is devolved or reserved, the department needs to provide an initial assessment of impact to assist us in deciding whether or not to conduct an inquiry. So in line with the revised committee procedures, departmental officials have been invited to attend today's meeting to brief members. We'll just wait till we welcome them.
Morning, folks.
Good morning. So we have Shane Doris, Director of Environmental Policy in DAERA, and Stephen Leckie, Principal Scientific Officer within DAERA. So you're very welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to hand over to yourselves now if you want to brief us on this regulation.
Thanks, Chair. And so you've done the introductions. My name is Shane Doris, Director of ERPD, and joined with Stephen from the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. And I appreciate the opportunity to provide some background on the Published Replacement Act Regulation 2024-1157 on shipments of waste, which amends Regulation 1257-2013 on ship recycling and amends Regulation 2020-1056 on electronic freight transport information, and repeals Regulation 1013-2006 on shipments of waste. You will be aware from the papers provided that international shipment of waste is reserved for policy and DEFRA is the lead department. Therefore, the assessment is limited at this stage. The only currently available UKG explanatory memorandum is from the proposal stage of the proposed Replacement Act. However, DAERA officials have engaged with UKG officials to request an assessment of impact and an updated EM to assist the committee, and I've been advised that work is ongoing, and an update to the current EM will be forwarded to the committee when available. In summary of the Act, the regulation lays down measures to protect the environment and human health and to contribute to climate neutrality and to achieving a circular economy and zero pollution by preventing or reducing the adverse impacts which can result from shipments of waste and from the treatment of waste at its destination. It establishes procedures and control regimes for shipments of waste depending on the origin, destination and route of the shipment, the type of waste and the type of treatment to be applied to the waste at its destination. The regulation applies to shipments of waste between member states with or without transit through third countries, shipments of waste imported into the EU from third countries, shipments of waste exported from the EU to third countries, and shipments of waste in transit through the EU on the way to or from third countries. The aim of the replacement regulation to prohibit the export of plastic waste to non-OECD countries, Other waste suitable for recycling will be exported from the EU to non-OECD countries only when they ensure that they can deal with it in a sustainable manner. It also implements an EU digital tracking system for waste shipments. And for clarity, OECD is the Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development, an international organisation that works to establish evidence-based international standards and solutions to a range of social, economic and environmental challenges. There are 38 member countries, including the UK, the United States and 22 of the EU member states. As mentioned at the introduction, a department responsible is DEFRA as the lead Department of International Waste Shipments, and the Northern Ireland Environment Agency is the named competent authority for enforcement and destination and dispatch. Touching on the initial assessment of impact, again referenced within the papers, DAERA's current understanding is that it does not appear likely to have a significant impact specific to everyday life of communities in Northern Ireland in a way that is liable to persist. However, DAERA is aware that the waste sector will be impacted by this Replacement Act. There's a significant volume of waste exported from Northern Ireland that falls under the remit of regulation on shipments of waste. In 2023, waste exports from Northern Ireland outside of the UK totalled just under 1 million tonnes. A more extensive exercise will be needed to review the new regulation to determine any issues that might arise from a regulatory perspective. This exercise is planned by the UK regulators for June 2024, and NIEA will be involved in that process. The EU digital system requirements. NIEA is currently working with DEFRA to ensure that the UK digital waste system, which is currently in development, will be interoperable with the new EU waste shipment regulation. And the UK government has stated in its EM at proposal stage that there may be additional regulatory costs to Northern Ireland depending on the outcome of negotiations and the requirement of the final regulation. It also advised that it was too early, however, to assess the additional costs at that stage. So that's some of the background to it, and a quick run through some of the points within the paper. Some points to note is, as this is a replacement regulation, much of the content of the regulation already exists and applies. Part of the update also reflects updates to the UN Basel Convention on transboundary shipments of waste, which regulates the transboundary movements of hazardous wastes and other wastes, and obliges its parties to ensure that such waste are managed and disposed of in an environmentally sound manner. The UK is party to this convention and would also have to adhere to the rules on international shipments of waste. And as mentioned, the new additions to the regulations are the export of waste from the EU to non-OECD countries, ensuring exports of waste from the EU are managed sustainably, unlocking potential for EU waste market to boost circular economy, and tackling waste trafficking. As mentioned, the EU membership of the Basel Convention, and so our understanding, without wishing to speak on behalf of DEFRA or UKG, so our understanding, the UK government has been proposing to introduce tougher rules on plastic exports, i.e. banning of all waste plastic exports to non-OECD countries, which was a 2019 manifesto commitment, and provision for this was included in the Environment Act in 2021. A consultation is anticipated but has not yet progressed. This new regulation would match that UK ambition within 2.5 years and requires that all waste will be monitored and should only be exported to facilities that have shown the waste can be managed sustainably. To offset impacts on current waste exports, the new digital tracking mechanisms will also make it easier for waste to be shipped within the EU for recycling. Northern Ireland is keen to develop a circular economy for waste, and the new UK-wide digital waste tracking system that is being developed will assist this greatly. It is expected that the UK system will be compatible with the new EU digital requirements. Similarly, one of the objectives within the UK digital waste tracking system is that it will assist in combating illegal waste trafficking. The proposed stronger cooperation between EU member states, new sanctions and on-the-ground expertise is to be welcomed in helping to address this issue. Now, I appreciate that's a very brief overview, and I've tried to build on some of the the briefing to address some initial queries that you may have. However, I'm happy to take any questions, and I'll try to answer those to the best of my knowledge, albeit in the context of this being a reserved matter.
Thank you very much, Shane. That actually was very useful. So I totally understand this is a reserve policy area. So a couple of questions. In terms, so what you're saying is that the British government intend to introduce legislation very similar to what the EU are intending to legislate at some point.
Well, they've certainly declared that as that's their ambition, and again, without willing to speak or wishing to speak on their behalf, that's their ambition that is publicly recognised.
Okay, and also you're saying that not going to have the legislation isn't going to have any major impact on community, society, but it will have an impact on the sector. Can I ask? I mean, it is quite a substantial amount of waste that is exported. I was a bit surprised at the extent of that. Can you tell me if that is, how many operators that waste, how many operators are involved in the sector, and if it's all private or if some of that, because I mean, as local councils collect waste, is some of it that exported from the public sector collection?
The companies all involved would be private sector, albeit they would be engaged with the public sector and facilitating the waste collection on their behalf. But they would be all private enterprises. I think there's possibly one or two major companies involved in that process, and we'd obviously be engaging with them as this progresses. One of the things to mention as well is it will be 2 years before these begin to apply and begin to be regulated, so that should allow time for either changes to, if required, changes to exporting to a more sustainable facility, if that is an issue, or to amend business models or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And just for clarity, I mean, the proposed legislation is about tightening, maybe issues that are existent today that are causing problems in terms of pollution, etc., and the exportation of plastic waste. So, I mean, the legislation should make the transportation of waste much more environmentally friendly.
Yes, that's ultimately what the aim is. There has been a number of amendments to the existing regulations made over a number of years, so this, I suppose, captures all of them as well and updates that. And yes, that is the ultimate aim, is to make it a more environmentally friendly process and to cut down on waste crime as well. And by tracking waste, the other element of this, by tracking that, means that we're able to build towards the circular economy, which again forms much of our ambitions within both DARE and beyond.
Good job. Thanks. Joanne?
Thank you, Chairman. Gents, thank you very much. It was helpful to have your input. It was also helpful to understand that the EAM that you've got is still the original one, and you haven't had an update on that yet, so that's helpful for us to know, because we appreciate that was some time ago and things may well have moved on since then. So I suppose that takes me to I have 3 questions for you. My first is, to what extent thus far have you fed into DEFRA on this issue? I mean, is there constant contact? To what extent have you fed in beyond what you did originally?
There is constant engagement with DEFRA throughout the process, and that's ongoing. And I'd mentioned, obviously, from the policy side of things, we're involved in that, and from a regulatory side of things, NIA are involved in that as well in preparation. Albeit that piece of work that will take place in June will be the biggest indicator of where we are, and then that will be used to inform next steps, and then inform industry and inform those impacted as well.
Okay, so essentially then you're monitoring what the implications may be, flagging up to DEFRA if it's going to cause us a problem, and then they go in and negotiate on our behalf. That's the general standard, yes? Okay, so you're monitoring those things, okay. Given where we are at present, you have stated that there's not going to be a significant impact, but you've also stated that it's too soon for us to know costs and so on. Do you consider then, in light of what information is still to come, that you know enough to make a substantive decision that there's not going to be a significant impact?
Our assessment in terms of the impact is based on communities and the wider population of Northern Ireland rather than specific industries. So we haven't got into that level of detail yet. We are aware that there obviously will be impacts, and I'm keen to have that negotiation position established first, and then we can advise stakeholders on the basis of that.
Could I just then follow up from that point? You mentioned in the course of your opening remarks, that the impact is going to be on all private sector companies, but that they undertake work for the public sector. Could you maybe explain what the impact then might be on the public sector? What type of work they're doing?
The companies involved are operating on waste collection, and they'll also be working in recycling facilities as well. So it would be part of those processes and part of that collection and management of the waste that they undertake that. And the export is, I suppose, the back end function of that in some ways, or in some areas.
So potentially there's an impact. If they're undertaking work for the public sector with regard to waste, presumably that's all levels of waste, therefore there is potential for there to be an impact on communities as an outworking of that, is there?
Yeah, there is potential, but again, as we'd said, because of the coming into force before it starts to apply, there's the 2 years to allow the transition there for the business models to reflect that.
Right, okay. And finally, Chair, just could you give us some additional information around the implications over plastics?
Well, the ban, one of the bans will relate to the plastic, a complete ban on plastics to non-OECD countries, and again, much of this is to try and stop that happening, where it's going to areas where it can't be processed properly or can't be dealt with sustainably. So the aim is really just to drive up recycling, drive up reuse, keep everything within the circular economy, and deal with those problematic items as well in the most environmentally sustainable manner.
We're an OECD country. The UK is.
Yes. Yeah.
And so no implications then that way?
It's really the non-OECD element is really to stop it being exported to countries outside of that, where it's not come under the same regulation. I know some of those things have been in the press in recent years, with plastic floating in the ocean, or plastic being seen mounted in piles in other countries outside, or non-OECD countries, where it's not being treated in the environmentally effective manner.
Okay, and to the best of your knowledge, does the UK ship waste to, or ship plastics to non-OECD countries? If you don't know, it's fine.
That's I'm not too sure. I need to just check
okay,
out
thank
details
you.
on that.
That's me finished. Thanks, Chair.
Good job. Steve?
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. And thanks very much, Stephen. Just a couple of ones, just trying to get my head around this. So if this regulation comes in force, is Northern Ireland waste deemed to be EU waste? Is it deemed to be UK waste? Or is it deemed to be third party, some hybrids sort of waste? That's the first question. Second question is the digital tracking system, and where do the costs lie? Because we know the huge the difficulties we're going to have with setting up all the other sort of digital systems we have at the moment. Where will the cost lie for that? Will that be on the private waste companies, or will that be in the department, or where will the cost be to set that up? And you said there was an expectation that in about 2.5 years, the rest of GB will migrate into something like that. But has any contracts been given for a digital waste management system in the UK? Because we all know how late these programs are likely to be, and I'm glad you did mention the word Fujitsu, because of that thing everybody would have gone, ooh! But just those sort of perspectives there, please. But particularly the one on how our waste is going to be classified.
That is one of the key issues to be established in that negotiations, how that's dealt with, the NI to GB waste and GB to NI.
Yeah.
That will be I would imagine, the crux of that negotiation, and how that will actually be regulated, to what extent, and to what implication that will be for the regulators and for those involved in those exports and imports. So that will start to be established.
So we don't know yet.
No, we don't.
Okay. And the digital?
The digital tracking, the work is ongoing. The 2.5 years was not really specifically in relation to the tracking element of that. More so, the obligations within the regulations would bring that in within the 2 years. On the tracking, the UK-wide digital tracking is being developed at the moment. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, but the basis for that is that it would be funded by those involved in that. It would be funded by the operators through fees. And so there would be no cost on that.
But the cost to obviously to the local authorities, because they provide they're the ones that, they will move the operators will move the cost on to whoever they're collecting the waste from, and the collecting the waste from will be sort of the consumer. So yeah, there is a cost to the people in Northern Ireland. It's just not going to necessarily be at the department.
Yes, the cost will have to be transferred to whoever the end user is in some shape or form.
And we've no quantum of those yet.
No, we don't.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
David?
I'm just going to come in whenever we're looking to make a decision. I think it's more because it's more comment than a question, so I'm happy to wait if that's.
Just a question following on from the points raised. So 1 million tonnes shipped outside the UK a year. Do you have a breakdown of the types of waste that's being shipped outside the UK, just for information purposes?
It's something we could potentially provide.
Okay.
We don't have it with me at present, but
because again, like the chair is quite shocked at the amount. I'm sure there is some sort of information regarding the breakdown. On Steve's point about the fees levied, so has there been any concern expressed by any of those that are exporting waste about how difficult a challenge this may be?
with the new regulations,
Yeah.
not at present.
So they would, I would assume, given it's their business model, I assume they're well aware of the potential changes in this regard.
Well, as the regulations have just come in, it's something that I say that exercise needs to be carried out with the other regulators to determine the implications to us as regulators, but also to our stakeholders. And once we would have that, then we could provide updates and communication to the stakeholders on any changes and implications, and obviously make DEFRA aware of those as well in that process.
And is there currently any fees levied by NIEA on those companies who are exporting waste?
For certain types of waste, there's two main types of waste that fall under the waste shipment regulations. There's notifiable waste and greenless waste, and there's fees associated with the notifiable waste.
What sort of figure would that indicate per tonnage, for example?
It's not per tonnage; it's per band, so it's by number of movements. Off the top of my head, I think there's a movement. It's about there's a band of 1 to 5 movements, and it's about £1,000 for that band. And excuse me, those. That policy hasn't been updated since 2014, and with the new regulations that will continue to apply, because the 1013/2006 regulations are still in place, and there has been no update yet to NIE's fees and refunds policy, so the fees will remain the same in relation to notifiable waste.
Okay, and we have no indication of what that fee may go to if you inbuilt this particular regulation and the associated costs?
The new regulations won't change the fees associated with the notification. That will be work that's a NIA specific TFS fees and refunds policy. So review work needs to happen on that. The other GB agencies have already started some of that work, but we're not in a position to do that just at the minute.
And in terms of the additional audits and inspections that are envisaged, what sort of team has NIA in place or would have to have in place to deal with the rise in inspection and audits?
I'm not.
I would imagine the aim of the introduction of the digital waste tracking is to streamline that process, to make it more efficient both for the regulators and for the operators as well. So we would hope that would in fact offset some of the costs as well, and make it more economically viable as well for those involved.
Would you accept that come June, when you have a full picture in terms of your full assessment, that you would be in a better place to assess whether or not it would have a significant impact on communities in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, we feel at that stage, we're going to be going over in June to sit down with the other regulators and look at it from that regulatory capacity and determine exactly what implications it might have. And from then, we can raise concerns with DEFRA to any issues it may raise for ourselves or for our stakeholders, and try and then work through those.
I would add at the June point, that would be the first step in that process. We would still need to get to the point where we have the finalised position, the finalised negotiated position between UKG and EU on that. So June may be too early to fully inform the decision on that.
Sure. Okay. David, do you want to come on now?
It was whenever we're looking at I just think that in terms of when we're looking at whether having an investigation or not.
Fair enough. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming before us. That was useful.
Thank you.
Okay.
No problem, thank you.
So, committee, under paragraph 8.1, Schedule 6B of the NI Act 1998, the committee must decide today whether or not to hold an inquiry into the published replacement EU Act that has been notified. Should the committee fail to decide, the failure will be treated as a decision not to hold an inquiry. So, can I ask, having regard to the legal advice and whether it appears likely that the replacement EU Act significantly differs in whole or in part from the content or scope of the EU instrument which it replaces, and the departmental initial assessment on whether it appears likely that the replacement act would have a significant impact specific to everyday life of communities here in a way that is liable to persist, do members wish to hold an inquiry into Regulation EU 2024-1157 of the European Parliament and of the Council on 11th April 2024 on shipments of waste, amending Regulations 1257/2013 and EU 2020-1056 and repealing Regulation EC number 1013/2006 text with EEA relevance?
Yes.
Yeah, Chair, if you don't mind, I would propose we do have that investigation. Just the point in particular developed by my colleague Joanne Bunting there around the potential costs to consumers. I think we need to hear from more stakeholders about that and what that might actually lead to, because as we know, some of these companies deal with councils and so on, and that may affect everyone in Northern Ireland around rates and those costs being passed on. So whilst I understand that these officials were speaking to how it affects their remit and the environmental concerns and so on, I think they certainly were quite helpful, and there's enough scope there that we need more information on some of the effects that might have.
Any other views? Owen?
Clark, Chair, it's just really a comment, and I guess that is, it's a limitation again of our own process, but given that we're not likely to know the outcome of engagement with the regulators until June, it's unlikely that even an inquiry will give us particular insight into the quantification of those costs. And we've made much of the department giving us an initial assessment, and their initial assessment is that it won't have a significant impact. So I think we should have regard for that. Look, content if other members want to proceed with an inquiry, but just to put those comments on record, because I'm conscious that there could start to become a capacity issue if every week we're meeting and discussing an EU regulation and we're agreeing a significant inquiry. There may be other issues that come down the line that we're not aware of, which we would prefer to prioritise. So it's just to be conscious of, but not disagreeing with the direction of travel.
Okay, I've got Jonathan there.
Sure, no, on Owen's point, which I think is a very valid point about information, so officials telling us it will be much more furnished in June. I'm not sure what way we can assist in that, but I do think it's a valid point. Again, further information will come down the line even beyond the point of an inquiry in. I know we can only deal with what we have in front of us, but it is a point of concern. I suppose that leads to what further pre-engagement can happen on these things going forward. But the fact is that the officials may come across something in June or even after that which does cause concern, and perhaps we've had an inquiry that didn't maybe come on the side of concern. So it's just something that the committee needs to balance up, I'm not sure on the answer on that, but I think it's a valid point to put on record.
One made the point that we may well be facing the same scenario the departments are facing. David?
Yeah, no doubt, but I do think there is grounds to hear from perhaps the Department of Economy around possibly economic impact, but also the opportunity from some of those private companies or stakeholders or sectoral organisations who are bound to have a view on some of this, to express that and at least inform our decision making around that. It also is the case that legal advice doesn't necessarily align with, or it's a different kind of advice, I guess, but they take a slightly different view on some of this. So I think that we have to have regard to that. So I think more information can be helpful, and I think the only way we can do that is by having that inquiry.
Steve, and then
yeah, just a very quick one, sort of, Chair, and I take Owen's comments about the sort of the likely volume of these things coming along, and there are going to be, as I've pointed out time and time again, they are going to be considerable. However, I believe we should be operating the precautionary principle, because what we heard from today from the evidence, and I think the more we probed, they realised that they had insufficient evidence as well. They didn't have issues on cost. They didn't know about classification waste and some of the really significant issues that are likely to come through the rest of it. I think from a committee, and I appreciate the workload is going to be significant, but I've always pointed out that the workload in this committee is going to be massive, and people who understand the EU will get to know how that's going to be. But I think the precautionary principle is the point that we should note, because we can't be in a situation where we're not doing something because of a basis of perceived volume of work. It is our job to act as to work on the precautionary principle. I just want to sort of make sure that as we are bedding in, and we know the workload is going to be significant. There's no talking to pretend it's not. It's going to be absolutely massive, but we need to be aware of that. If we have to be continuously calling for inquiries, maybe that's what we have to do.
okay, so there's one proposal, accepting Owen's comment. So everybody's content then.
Yeah.
Okay, so committee's decision will be published on our webpage. Members, can you consider and agree the inquiry timeline? It's at page 193, which includes an oral evidence session with departmental officials next week. So for the way this thing works, we're going to have the departmental officials back again next week. It would be useful if we maybe alerted them to some of the questions that they weren't able to answer today. Obviously there was a lot of talk about June, so they may not be able to answer much more, but some of the questions that we answered today, if they can take a look at that, maybe provide more information next week. Seek agreement, I'm looking to seek agreement from the committee that we put a survey on citizen space and identify.
I mean, we've heard very clearly there that there is additional work going on in June, but we haven't been given the virus to sort of deal with that because of the timelines we have. Is it also worth us as a committee highlighting again to the joint committee that this is an issue that's coming before us, but we know that there's more work that's being done downstream. So just as a heads up, because what we're trying to do is manage that we never get to these situations, would it be worth us going to the committee and saying, here's a situation that we have. We know that there's more work that's going to be doing in June. That is beyond our timelines, and ask them for consideration.
Okay.
It just seems to me that we've been told very clearly, Chair, that they're going to be doing something in June. We're stuck to a rigid timeline, and the department aren't going to be able to, for the best will in the world, aren't going to be able to answer the questions that we have because they'll be having the meeting in June.
Okay, everybody content? Okay, so it's also going on to citizen space, and from the key representatives of business and civil society that are identified by raise at page 196 of the meeting pack, and the closing date's the 20th of May. Can I ask the Secretary of Staff to include a request in the notice to stakeholders that they circulate the survey widely within their membership?
Sure. I'm just looking at this. Bear in mind the impact that there may be on the public sector. Do we need to be including councils in this?
I'm yeah, we can do that.
I think so.
I think we should. I think that's where the rubber hits the road for a lot of for the citizens of Northern Ireland.
Okay, advise members, citizen-based survey will be promoted on social media platforms and anybody is able to respond. And in line with our agreed processes, views on the EU Act and its impact on communities here and details of the position in England, Scotland and Wales will be requested from the British Government. Okay, so next item.
Right. Just on that list as well, are we satisfied that, and I don't know is the honest answer, that within those sectoral bodies, those those who handle waste are covered, the individual companies?
Well, I would assume they are, yeah.
My understanding from the officials was that everything goes
Could
through
we check,
a
and if
public.
not, could we add if they're going to get it through their
Okay.
sectoral organisation, fine. But if not, we can all probably think of some of the significant companies in that regard. If they're not covered by that, could we reach out to them?
Yeah, I think ARC 21, because that covers a lot of the councils as well on waste. I mean, not that they're my favourite body by any stretch of the imagination, but it would be, they should be in part of that consultation process.
I mean, I'm conscious that some of the groups were talking about collect waste. I mean, this is different. This is about exporting waste, so...
It's the cost issue, I
The
think,
costs
Chair.
and where they end up.
Okay. So, we're moving on then. Item number 8, EU Regulation 2024-1143 on geographical indications for wine, spirits, spirit drinks and agricultural products. So, again, this item is going to be recorded by Hansard. Can I refer everybody to pages 215 to 316 and remind everybody at last week's meeting the committee agreed to hold an inquiry into the replacement EU Act and officials were invited to give oral evidence today. Good morning. Probably afternoon now, is it? No, it's not still morning. So can I just welcome Alison Chambers, Director of Sustainable Agri-Food Development within DERA, and Samantha Stewart, Agri-Food Development Division within DERA. I'm happy to hand over to yourselves. You just want to present on the regulation?
Thank you very much, Chair. By way of a general overview, food, drink and agricultural product names with a geographical connection can be registered and protected as intellectual property. This protection is called a geographical indication, which covers protected geographical indications, PGIs, protected designations of origin, PDOs, and spirit drink GIs. Product names which follow a geographic tradition in their preparation can also be protected as traditional speciality guaranteed. So GI protection guarantees a product's qualities, characteristics or reputation as well as its authenticity and origin. It protects the product name from misuse or imitation. As such, they're a way of recognising the unique skills and knowledge of our food and drink producers and of promoting Northern Ireland produce. DEFRA is the competent authority for GIs in Northern Ireland, and following EU exit, the UK created its own UK GI scheme. All GIs produced in the UK registered before exit day would continue to be recognised under the EU scheme and carry across to the new UK scheme. And Northern Ireland producers can either apply to both the EU scheme or the UK scheme as they choose, either simultaneously or sequentially. As the committee will be aware, Northern Ireland currently has 4 GIs, Loughney Pollen, which is PDO, Loughney Eels, PGI, New Season Cumber Potatoes, which is PGI, and Armagh Bramley Apples, which is PGI. There are also 4 All Ireland GIs, Irish Cream Liqueur, Irish Poaching, Irish Whisky, and the most recently granted PGI for Irish grass-fed beef, which is under the EU scheme only. The application for a GI is an opportunity for a producer to register a product that is unique as a result of its geographical location and is an opportunity to set the product apart from similar products on the market. For example, a study carried out by the European Commission in 2017 found that the sales value of PGI meat products was on average 1.2 times the sales value for comparable standard products without a GI label. Applications for both the EU and the UK GI schemes are reserved and are the responsibility of the DEFRA Secretary of State. However, DERA acts as the point of contact between DEFRA and Northern Ireland GI stakeholders, including applicants, operators for existing GIs, control bodies and enforcement bodies, coordinating advice and support on DEFRA's behalf. Control bodies are responsible for ensuring that the producer is conforming to the technical specification of the GI via initial verification, with occasional audits to be reassured of continued adherence. In Northern Ireland, enforcement bodies are district councils. During the legislative process, DEFRA sought comment from DERA in 2022. during preparation of an explanatory memorandum where DAERA officials provided a number of technical comments, with the caveat that in the absence of a minister, those views reflect those of officials only. And this EM was provided to you in the initial impact assessment and considered at your meeting last week. Following publication of the Replacement Act on the 23rd of April 2024, DEFRA began updating this explanatory memorandum in light of the finalised regulation. This was shared with DAERA on the 3rd of May with a request for comment the same day. A number of factual comments were made in response. DEFRA also advised that the final version of the document may differ slightly from that had been shared. We understand that an amended EM on the GI file is being prepared by colleagues in DEFRA with input from the Cabinet Office. We also understand that it's unlikely that you will have seen this today and completed internal Westminster clearance before your session today, but we have impressed upon our colleagues in DEFRA the urgent need to get this information to you as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that last comment. Information is key, and timely information is obviously key for us. So, I mean, we all understand that intellectual property is a reserved policy matter, but you did in your evidence say that DAERA is the point of contact between DEFRA and groups here, and that councils are actually the enforcement bodies. So, with regard to all of that, an element of implementation oversight that you have you identified any impacts of concern regarding implementation?
We have requested that DEFRA conduct an impact analysis study for us as part of the information that they will provide.
Okay. And that will be included in the EM, or is that over and above the EM?
That would be over and above the EM and sit alongside it.
Okay. And your view is that the EM could be ready in a matter of days, and you have urged that we see that as soon as possible?
It's our hope that you would see that as soon as possible. We had hoped you would see it before now. It's just DEFRA colleagues are following a process and going through Cabinet Office. But we have impressed upon them the need to get the information to you as soon as possible. Okay,
and in terms of the information that you've provided DEFRA for their EM, the updated information, can you provide sort of your comments to us today that they will hopefully include within their EM on the impact specifically here?
Well, I know the EM that you received from 2022 did highlight that no substantive policy comments or concerns were received, although the Northern Ireland Executive provided input, particularly in respect of the impact of this proposal on the regulatory scheme in place in Northern Ireland. As it's a matter for DEFRA, it's up to them how they want to present that information, but we did in fact go back with a number of comments, and I think we could probably share our response at that time with you.
Okay.
So officials from Northern Ireland Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs have an interest in this proposal as it falls within the scope of the protocol in Northern Ireland. As the proposal does not fall under devolved competence, responsibility for implementing the measure rests with the UK Government. However, our policy officials are liaising with their UKG policy counterparts to determine what action is required and what possible impacts the proposal may have in Northern Ireland. Input was provided at official level and didn't represent the views of Northern Ireland ministers at the time. So we have asked them to look at financial analysis and impact analysis as part of that. That was back in 2022 as well, and we've more or less reflected the same comments this time round.
Okay. And just in terms of how DEFRA would do it, would they engage with the bodies that are currently have GIs? I mean, is that how they would assess that impact?
We suggested to them back in 2022 that they would engage directly with Northern Ireland stakeholders.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, thank you. David?
Thanks very much, Chair. Does the Department have any views on how the changes, or do they have any concerns around how the changes might impact the GB supply chain, or indeed the promotion of existing GIs?
We've asked DEFRA to conduct a full impact assessment on that.
Okay. No other questions? Steve?
Just one. Have you had any indication at all when this EM, and you said that you expect the EM to, the EM is actually in the Cabinet Office now rather than at DEFRA?
That's our understanding.
Okay. So, Chair.
Yes, sorry.
Thinking, I think it's a salient point. If the EM, which I don't think any of us can make a decision until we've actually read the EM, but if the EM is in the Cabinet Office, and remember the Cabinet Office owes us one for its FUBAR, to put it mildly, about not giving us the information from the previous applicability motion in time. I think it might be useful, sort of, if we can communicate directly with the Cabinet Office to get this EM released to us.
It was just literally telling me that she is meeting the Cabinet Office this afternoon.
Oh,
so
brilliant. Okay, fine. That's fine.
So we
Sure.
can make that point.
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for your attendance today.
Thank you.
So just to let everybody know, the committee's Citizen Space Survey has launched and will close on the 13th of May, and the committee will consider responses at next week's meeting and will then consider a draft report at our meeting on the 23rd of May.
Yeah.
Regular. Okay, so next item of business, correspondence. Correspondence from the Minister for the Economy regarding the statutory obligations of his department to support the work of the Democratic Scrutiny is at page 318 of the meeting pack. Can I ask if members are content, given the relevance of our earlier discussions on the procedures, that advice is prepared on the issues raised within the letter for consideration at next week's meeting? Okay. Copy of correspondence from the British House of Lords European Affairs Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework to the Cabinet Office, outlining the findings of its inquiry into veterinary medicines, and the Windsor Framework is at page 320 of the meeting pack. This has already been copied to the dear Minister. Are members content to note?
Yeah.
Okay. Correspondence regarding an EU regulation on the carbon border adjustment mechanism has been forwarded by the Committee of Finance. It's at page 343. The regulation was published in the Official Journal 16th of May 2023. In its command paper, the British Government says that it's a new EU Act which will be subject to an applicability motion if the EU seeks to add it to the Windsor Framework. So are members content that we write to the British Cabinet Office for an update on that position? Okay. We also received correspondence from an MLA regarding Commission implementing Regulation EU 2024-591. That's at page 345. Are members content to write to, again, the Cabinet Office advising that an inquiry has been received about this particular implementing regulation and asking whether this is one in respect of which a notification should have been made?
Yeah,
Yes, Chair.
Go ahead, David. Sorry.
Go ahead, David.
I was just asking also to clarify, to give clarity on how they assess whether or not requires notification, and how UKG will monitor the developments with the EU to ensure implementing regs are not used as part of a conduit to make sweeping changes in laws currently in the scope of the framework.
Okay, fair enough. Number 10, Chair's business. Have none. Number 11, any other business, Steve?
Sort of 2 points of AOB, sort of Chair, and I'll keep these short. The first one is I've been written to by the House of Lords to give evidence in their Windsor Framework Committee in June. I'll be doing that in the capacity as a party member, not as a party member of this committee, but if I will allude to the fact that I'm a member of this committee and sort of the processes that we have had, but it will be from a purely party perspective. I won't be giving the opinion of this committee at any stage. The second point is, those of you who've noticed in your papers the Brussels report from Aidan Conley, which covers in quite a lot of detail some of the sort of the key issues. Now, one of the things during the previous assembly, one of the things we encouraged was that the Brussels report should be made more freely available to MLAs to read. It's actually a very well written document and covers a lot of the sort of the key issues that we need to do. I wonder if we could be, as members of this committee, as a courtesy, could be placed on the desk list when it goes out, because I know it goes to certain stakeholders, but it doesn't necessarily go to MLAs. And I think ourselves would probably be useful if it went to us, because there's quite a lot of good background information, particularly about the waste issue, and the rest of it are already in that thing. And Aidan and his team are to be commended for their hard work. I just feel sometimes that they do an awful lot of this hard work and nobody actually reads it. I think we should be. Okay.
I mean, how would we?
I think it has been distributed because I know in the economy committee we did receive it in our correspondence this week.
I don't think
I mean, I could contact the executive office in Brussels and ask them to add all MLAs to the distribution list. Yeah.
So it's coming from them. Plus we.
It's not our role.
Yeah. 100%. Date, time, place of next meeting. So next meeting is next Thursday, 16th of May, 2024, 10 a.m. room 30. Shin Shin. Thank you. Sure, Margaret.
Committee room 30. Sound. Committee room 30. Sound. Committee room 30. Sound.